I have presided over thousands of courtroom disputes. I have seen forged signatures, fake injuries, manufactured evidence, invented witnesses. But there is one case I still remember because the truth did not come from a medical document, a team of expert doctors, or even a prolonged cross-examination. It came from a simple reflex, a reflex that occurred in less than 1 second, destroying a lie one man had spent months trying to carefully hide. And believe me, when that moment happened, the entire courtroom froze. Because a young man named Vance had built his entire multi-million-dollar lawsuit around one devastating claim. He insisted his right arm was completely paralyzed, permanently useless. He repeated it in sworn affidavits. He repeated it in depositions. He repeated it in court. And for a while, the insurance companies believed him. Then, one unexpected, flying object destroyed everything. Before we go any further, make sure you have subscribed to this channel for more powerful courtroom stories like this one. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Also, comment below and tell us where you are watching this video from. Now, let me take you back to where this case truly began. The defendant in this civil suit was a man named Arthur Pendleton, 68 years old. He was a retired high school teacher, soft-spoken, visibly distressed, the kind of man who answered questions directly and carried the heavy weight of the accusation on his shoulders. Across from him sat Vance, 28 years old. Marcus wore a sharp, expensive suit, a smug expression, and a heavy, elaborate medical sling, securing his right arm tightly against his chest. His posture suggested he expected absolute sympathy and a massive financial settlement before anyone even heard the facts. Years on the bench teach you something important. Sympathy and credibility are not the same thing. Marcus appeared to believe they were. The dispute involved a minor traffic collision. According to Arthur, he had accidentally bumped into Marcus's parked car in a grocery store parking lot at less than 5 miles per hour. A fender bender, a scratched bumper, nothing more. The matter should have been settled privately with a few $100s. Then, months later, Marcus filed a massive personal injury lawsuit, alleging that the minor jolt caused catastrophic nerve damage, leaving his dominant right arm entirely paralyzed. Interesting, very interesting, because according to the original police report, Marcus had refused medical attention at the scene, claiming he was perfectly fine. If his injury was truly that severe, that timeline raised serious questions, very serious questions. But if untrue, it would raise even bigger ones. I asked Arthur to explain his side. He stood carefully, his hands shaking slightly, and presented photographs of the vehicles from the day of the incident. The physical damage was virtually non-existent, a slight scuff mark. Everything appeared consistent with a low-speed bump. Marcus interrupted almost immediately. He destroyed my life and my entire career. Interesting, very interesting, because emotional accusations often arrive before evidence. I looked toward him. You will have an opportunity to speak. Marcus scoffed, adjusting his heavy sling with his left hand, and leaned back with undeniable arrogance. The spectators watched carefully. I noticed something immediately. Not evidence, behavior. Years on the bench teach you to observe people when they believe nobody is watching. Marcus's absolute confidence seemed unnatural for someone whose life had supposedly just been ruined. That observation stayed with me, not because it proved anything, but because it was interesting. I continued listening. I turned my attention back to the documents. Documents do not lie, but they often reveal the lies of the people who submit them. Marcus had provided a thick stack of medical records, dozens of pages, bills, physical therapy evaluations, clinic summaries. Everything appeared overwhelming at first glance. I reviewed them carefully. Then again, because when a man claims complete, irreversible paralysis from a minor parking lot fender bender, you look for the definitive diagnosis. I searched for an MRI, a nerve conduction study, a definitive statement from a certified neurologist. Nothing. The records repeatedly used phrases like reported numbness, patient states inability to move, and subjective loss of sensation. Interesting. Very interesting. Because subjective means the doctor is simply writing down exactly what the patient tells them. It is not objective proof of an injury. It is simply proof of a complaint. I looked up at Marcus. Who diagnosed the total paralysis? He adjusted his posture, his right arm remaining perfectly dead weight in the expensive sling. My doctors. It's all in the file. No, I corrected him calmly. Your complaints are in the file. A definitive medical conclusion is not. The spectators became quiet, very quiet. Marcus's smug expression faltered for a fraction of a second. Just a fraction. But I noticed it. Years on the bench teach you that people who are telling the truth embrace specific questions. People who are lying retreat into generalities. Then I found the initial emergency room report, the one filed by the paramedics on the exact day of the accident. I read it once, then twice, because details matter a lot. According to the responding EMT, Marcus had full range of motion at the scene. Furthermore, he signed the refusal of medical transport form with, you guessed it, his right hand. Interesting. Very interesting. I held up the document. You signed this refusal form at 2:14 p.m. with your right hand. Yet your lawsuit claims the paralysis was immediate upon impact. Marcus shifted his weight, his left hand gripping the edge of the table. The shock hadn't worn off yet. The nerve died later that night. Interesting answer. Entirely possible in rare medical anomalies. The problem was that his delivery sounded rehearsed, very rehearsed, and rehearsed answers often fall apart when confronted with spontaneous reality. Arthur Pendleton sat quietly, listening. He did not interrupt. He did not shout. He is lying. Many litigants feel compelled to celebrate contradictions. Arthur simply waited. That observation improved Arthur's credibility immensely. Marcus then began discussing his ruined career. He claimed he was a freelance graphic designer, unable to use his mouse, unable to draw, unable to earn a living. The financial damages he was seeking were astronomical. I asked for his tax returns. If you claim lost wages, you must prove you had wages to lose. He handed over a thin folder with his left hand. His movements were incredibly fluid and natural for someone who had supposedly spent 28 years being right-handed and only 8 months adapting to a sudden, catastrophic disability. Not impossible, just interesting. And that was when Arthur slid a supplementary evidence binder across the table. Your Honor, Arthur said softly, I hired a private investigator. The moment the words private investigator filled the room, the atmosphere changed completely. The courtroom suddenly buzzed with a low murmur. A private investigator in a minor traffic collision case? That was highly unusual. Usually, these disputes relied on police reports and insurance adjusters. But Arthur, realizing he was facing absolute financial ruin from a multi-million-dollar lawsuit, had spent his remaining savings to hire a professional. Marcus's lawyer objected immediately. Your Honor, this is an ambush. We have not been provided any discovery regarding a private investigator. I held up my hand, signaling for silence. This is small claims court, counselor, not a federal criminal trial. If the defendant has evidence directly refuting your client's core claim, I am going to see it. Proceed, Mr. Pendleton. Arthur nodded, his hands steadier now. He opened the binder. I hired a licensed investigator to observe Mr. Vance for 3 days last week. I submitted the surveillance logs and the video files to the bailiff this morning. I looked at the bailiff, who nodded and handed me a USB drive. I inserted it into my terminal. The first video played. It was date-stamped 4 days prior. The footage showed Marcus walking out of a gym. A gym. Interesting. Very interesting. Someone with complete paralysis in their dominant arm wouldn't typically frequent a gym unless they were undergoing specialized physical therapy. But the sign above the door clearly read, Iron Core Powerlifting. The video continued. Marcus walked toward his car, the heavy medical sling nowhere to be seen. His right arm swung naturally at his side, not stiff, not guarded, naturally. The courtroom went dead silent. Marcus swallowed hard, the muscles in his jaw clenching. His lawyer leaned away from him, visibly disturbed by what was playing on the screen. Let's watch the next clip, I said, my voice cutting through the heavy silence. The second video was stamped the following day. Marcus was at a home improvement store. He approached a stack of 50-pound bags of landscaping sand. With absolute ease, using both hands, he hoisted a bag onto his shoulder, carried it to a flatbed cart, and dropped it. He repeated this motion 3 times. I paused the video and looked directly at Marcus. The arrogant smirk was entirely gone, replaced by the pale, wide-eyed look of a man who realized the ground had just opened up beneath his feet. Mr. Vance, I said slowly, allowing the weight of the moment to settle over the room. According to your sworn testimony today and the multiple affidavits you submitted to this court, your right arm is completely paralyzed. Yet, I am looking at a video of you effortlessly throwing 50-pound bags of sand. Marcus stammered, his left hand gripping the table edge so tightly his knuckles turned white. I have good days and bad days, Your Honor. The adrenaline. Adrenaline? I raised an eyebrow. You experienced an adrenaline rush while shopping for landscaping supplies? A few muffled laughs erupted from the spectator gallery. I didn't silence them immediately. Sometimes, public humiliation is the first step toward genuine accountability. It's a fluctuating condition, Marcus tried again, his voice losing its confident edge. My doctors said, Your doctors, I interrupted sharply, said exactly what you told them to say. You reported subjective numbness. You reported an inability to move. You lied to medical professionals to build a fraudulent foundation for a multi-million-dollar shakedown. I turned my attention back to the screen. Is there more, Mr. Pendleton? Arthur nodded, a small, dignified smile finally appearing on his face. One more clip, Your Honor, from yesterday afternoon. I played the final video. Arthur Pendleton was not finished. He played the final video, not waiting for Marcus's explanation. The date stamp indicated it had been recorded the very morning of the trial. The scene was the courthouse parking lot. Marcus's expensive sports car pulled into a space. Marcus stepped out, entirely unencumbered. He reached into his back seat with his right hand, grabbed the heavy medical sling, and began to put it on. The camera remained fixed on him as he meticulously strapped the prop around his neck, adjusting his right arm into the carefully rehearsed position of uselessness. He then slammed his car door shut with his left hand, practicing his pained expression in the reflection of his window before walking toward the building. I believe the defense rests, Your Honor, Arthur Pendleton said quietly, his voice finally completely steady. The courtroom remained frozen. The silence was absolute. I looked at Marcus Vance. The arrogance that had radiated from him when he first walked into the room had completely vanished. He looked small. He looked terrified. He looked exactly like a man who understood his life was about to change, just not in the lucrative way he had planned. Your Honor, Marcus stammered again. My lawyer told me. Do not attempt to pass the blame for your own perjury, Mr. Vance, I warned him, my voice sharp enough to cut through the remaining tension in the room. Your attorney did not tell you to fake a catastrophic injury. Your attorney did not tell you to lie under oath. And your attorney certainly did not tell you to throw a baseball with an arm you swore to this court was paralyzed. I leaned back, taking a moment to look around the courtroom. I looked at the spectators, many of whom were shaking their heads in disgust. I looked at Arthur Pendleton, an innocent man who had almost lost his life savings, his retirement, and his peace of mind because of a minor scratch on a bumper. And I looked at Marcus Vance, a young man who believed his ability to lie was stronger than the truth. This is not just a frivolous lawsuit, I stated clearly, addressing the entire room. This is an attempted shakedown. It is an abuse of the judicial system. It is a calculated, deliberate attempt to destroy another man's life for financial gain. I turned my attention back to Marcus. Case dismissed. With prejudice. You will receive nothing from Mr. Pendleton. Furthermore, I am ordering you to pay all of the defense's legal fees and the cost of the private investigator. Marcus flinched at the word fees, but I wasn't finished. Finally, I continued, I am ordering the bailiff to forward the transcripts of today's hearing, along with all submitted medical affidavits and the surveillance footage, directly to the district attorney's office. They will determine if perjury and insurance fraud charges are appropriate. I highly recommend you retain criminal counsel. The sound of the gavel hitting the sounding block echoed loudly in the quiet courtroom. It was the sound of reality finally catching up to privilege. The lesson here is simple. People often believe that power, wealth, or a convincing performance can shield them from consequences. They believe they can manufacture a reality that suits them. But the truth has a funny way of surviving. It doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need a team of lawyers. Sometimes, the truth just needs a simple reflex, a dropped pen, or a flying set of keys to shatter an entire mountain of lies. Next time you see someone trying to use the legal system as a weapon, or trying to hide behind a manufactured narrative, remember Marcus Vance. Remember the man who thought he was untouchable, right up until the moment his own actions proved he was a fraud. Because in the end, character is what remains when power fails, and the truth, eventually, always finds a way. The sound of the gavel hitting the sounding block should have been the end of the story. The case was dismissed. The fraud was exposed. Justice, it seemed, had been fully served. But years on the bench teach you something very important about cases involving wealth and privilege. They rarely end cleanly. Because Marcus wasn't just an arrogant young man who made a terrible mistake. He was Marcus Vance, the son of Richard Vance, one of the wealthiest and most influential real estate developers in the entire state. A family whose name was printed on hospital wings, university libraries, and charity galas. That detail mattered. It mattered a lot, because when people with limitless resources are publicly cornered, they rarely surrender. They appeal. They delay. They bury their opponents in endless legal paperwork, frivolous countersuits, and procedural motions until the innocent party simply runs out of money and gives up. Arthur Pendleton, a retired high school teacher living on a fixed pension, had already spent his savings to expose the truth. He could not afford a drawn-out, multi-year legal war. Marcus knew this. Even after the devastating video evidence of him throwing the baseball, even after my severe ruling and the threat of criminal perjury charges, a subtle shift occurred in his demeanor. The initial panic faded. You could see the cold, calculated realization washing over his face. His family's money could likely shield him from the consequences. He looked back toward the spectator gallery, specifically at an older, sharply dressed gentleman sitting in the very last row, Richard Vance. His father had sat silently through the entire proceeding. He watched the fraudulent medical documents being dismantled. He watched the surveillance videos of his son lifting sandbags. He watched Marcus's elaborate, multi-million-dollar lie completely unravel in open court. I watched Richard stand up. The courtroom held its collective breath. Everyone, including Marcus's own defeated defense attorney, expected the powerful patriarch to unleash hell. We expected him to dial a team of elite, high-priced corporate fixers. We expected him to protect the family name at all costs, perhaps even threatening to sue Arthur for invasion of privacy regarding the private investigator. That is what power usually does. It acts as a shield. It protects its own, regardless of guilt. Marcus smirked slightly, adjusting his now useless medical sling with his left hand, and turned to meet his father, clearly expecting a rescue. "Dad, we need to call Harrison. Get the legal team down here to fix this mess." Interesting. Very interesting. Because people who have never faced a consequence in their lives truly believe that every problem is just a miscalculation that money can erase. But Richard Vance didn't pull out his phone. He didn't gesture to the defense attorney. He didn't glare at Arthur Pendleton. Instead, he walked right past the wooden partition, approached his son's table, and did something that I had never seen in my 4 decades of presiding over courtroom disputes. Something that made the entire room freeze all over again, proving that while privilege is common, true character is exceptionally rare. The day after the trial ended, a local news outlet picked up the story. It didn't take long for the surveillance video to leak. Within 48 hours, the image of Marcus Vance, heavily slung in court, juxtaposed with the image of him effortlessly throwing a baseball, was everywhere. It became a viral sensation, a perfect, condensed story of privilege collapsing under the weight of its own arrogance. The public reaction was swift and unforgiving. People are often cynical about the justice system, assuming it only serves those who can afford elite representation. Marcus's case became a glaring, highly visible example of exactly what happens when someone tries to exploit that cynicism. The internet dubbed him the baseball bandit. Memes circulated. Legal commentators analyzed the sheer audacity of his lie. The public humiliation was absolute. But the consequences extended far beyond internet mockery. The district attorney, under significant public pressure and armed with undeniable video evidence, moved quickly. Marcus was formally indicted on multiple felony charges, including perjury, insurance fraud, and attempted grand theft. The Vance family name, previously associated with philanthropy and high society galas, was suddenly synonymous with a cheap, fraudulent shakedown. Richard Vance remained true to his word in the courtroom. He did not hire the family's corporate firm to defend his son. He did not issue public statements defending Marcus's character. He allowed the legal process to unfold exactly as it should for any ordinary citizen facing felony charges. Marcus was forced to hire a standard defense attorney and face the reality of a potential prison sentence without the protective shield of his father's immense wealth. The impact on Arthur Pendleton, however, was a different story entirely. The retired teacher, who had spent months living in terror of losing his home and his pension over a minor parking lot bump, was suddenly vindicated. The dark cloud of the multi-million-dollar lawsuit had been permanently lifted. When the local news interviewed Arthur a week later, he didn't gloat. He didn't celebrate Marcus's downfall. He stood on his small front porch, looking tired but profoundly relieved. "I just wanted the truth to come out," Arthur told the reporter quietly. "I knew I hadn't hurt him. I knew it. But when you are facing a lawsuit for millions of dollars, and the other side has endless money, the truth starts to feel very fragile." I hired the investigator because it was the only way I could think of to show the court what was really happening. I didn't want to ruin his life. I just wanted him to stop trying to ruin mine." That statement resonated deeply with the public. It highlighted the profound imbalance of power that often exists in civil litigation. It showed the terror that an ordinary person feels when targeted by someone with vast resources and zero ethical boundaries. And it underscored the importance of fighting back, even when the odds seem insurmountable. The case of Marcus Vance serves as a stark reminder of a fundamental truth. A lie is a heavy burden to carry. It requires constant energy, flawless execution, and an environment where no one questions the narrative. Marcus believed his privilege created that environment. He thought his confidence and his father's name made him unquestionable. He was wrong, because the truth is remarkably patient. It doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need an expensive suit. It just waits for the moment the performance inevitably fails. Years on the bench teach you that justice is not always swift, and it is not always perfect. But when a lie is finally exposed, when the manufactured narrative shatters against the hard edge of reality, the collapse is total. And in that moment, privilege means nothing, and character means everything. The courtroom fallout was immediate. Arthur Pendleton's attorney filed a motion for sanctions. Marcus Vance not only lost his multi-million-dollar claim, but he was also ordered to pay Arthur's considerable legal expenses, including the cost of the private investigator who had exposed him. Furthermore, the district attorney's office did, in fact, review the court transcripts and surveillance footage. Marcus was formally charged with perjury and attempted insurance fraud. He didn't walk away with millions. He walked away with a criminal record. But the real lesson of this case goes far beyond the dramatic reveal or the severe legal consequences. It's about the fundamental nature of truth and deception. Years on the bench teach you that a lie, no matter how well-funded or meticulously rehearsed, is inherently fragile. It requires constant maintenance. It requires the liar to remember every detail, anticipate every question, and control every variable. Marcus Vance thought he could control the variables. He thought an expensive suit, a heavy medical sling, and an aggressive attorney would make him untouchable. He underestimated the simple, unyielding power of reality. People who attempt to manipulate the system often believe that their performance is the only thing that matters. They focus so heavily on the narrative they are presenting inside the courtroom that they forget the real world exists outside of it. Marcus forgot that he couldn't turn off his natural reflexes. He forgot that muscle memory is stronger than a fabricated story. He forgot that the truth doesn't require a performance. It simply requires observation. Arthur Pendleton didn't win because he had a better lawyer or a more dramatic story. He won because he trusted the truth. He didn't panic. He didn't match Marcus's aggressive theatrics. He simply found a way to let reality speak for itself. He understood that when someone is working that hard to sell a lie, all you have to do is show the court what happens when they stop performing. There is a growing cynicism that the legal system only works for the wealthy, the powerful, or the loudest person in the room. And while the system is certainly not perfect, cases like this remind us of its essential purpose. The courtroom is designed to strip away the performance. It is designed to test the narrative against the evidence. When power and privilege attempt to steamroll justice, they often rely on the assumption that nobody will look too closely. Marcus Vance assumed nobody would look closely. He assumed his bold claims and intimidating posture would be enough. But he learned the hardest lesson of all. Arrogance is not a substitute for evidence. Next time you hear someone loudly proclaiming their victimhood while demanding massive compensation, or attempting to use their status to crush someone less powerful, remember this case. Remember the young man who thought he could outsmart the law, outspend his opponent, and act his way into a fortune. Remember that a lie can be dressed up, rehearsed, and presented with absolute confidence, but it only takes one moment, one flying baseball, one simple reflex, one undeniable fact to bring the entire charade crashing down. Because when the performance ends, character is the only thing left standing, and the truth, no matter how hard you try to hide it, will always expose the fraud. The days and months following the trial of Marcus Vance were quiet, but the ripples it caused in the community were anything but small. You see, when someone like Marcus falls, when that carefully curated image of untouchable power is ripped away, it doesn't just change their life, it changes the atmosphere of the entire town. Marcus faced his sentencing with a heavy heart, not because of the remorse he felt for his actions, but because of the harsh reality of the legal system he had tried to weaponize. He didn't just get a slap on the wrist, he served time. A real, tangible consequence. For the first time in his life, his name on a building or a bank account couldn't buy his way out of a holding cell. It was the most important education he ever received. Arthur Pendleton, the retired teacher, returned to his quiet life, but with his peace of mind restored. He didn't become rich, he didn't seek fame, but he won the one thing that truly mattered, his dignity. His case proved that even against a titan, the truth has teeth. It reinforced the idea that our legal system, for all its flaws, is still capable of delivering justice when the facts are brought to light. But what does this case truly mean for you, watching this today? We live in a world where we are constantly bombarded by images of people who seem to exist above the rules. We see the shortcuts, we see the arrogance, we see people who think that power is a shield. This case was a brutal reminder that power is never a shield. Character is. When Marcus stood in that courtroom, he wasn't just on trial for insurance fraud, he was on trial for his integrity, and he failed. His father, Richard, had to make the hardest decision of his life. He could have been the villain who bought his son's freedom, perpetuating the cycle of entitlement. Instead, he chose to be a father who loved his son enough to let him face the consequences. That was the real twist. That was the moment where true power was displayed, the power to do the right thing when it cost you everything. So, next time you see someone abusing their position, hiding behind a name, or treating the rules like suggestions, remember the baseball, remember the sling. Remember that the higher you build a house of lies, the more devastating the collapse becomes when the foundation of truth gives way. Justice doesn't care who your father is. It doesn't care how much money is in your bank account. It cares about the facts, and it cares about the truth. Character is what remains when power fails, and in the end, it's the only thing that truly lasts. Thank you for watching this story of justice served. If you believe that no one should be above the law, then this case is a testament to that belief. Stay observant, stay honest, and always remember, the truth is the only thing that sets you free.